Welcome back to Greenhawk Sanctuary.
So I just wanted to chat a little bit about this whole concrete pillar, pier foundation, floating foundation thing that we did for our little home. And we are not professionals by any means. So just remember that this is food for thought, just opening up the conversation. And hopefully, I'm talking about this in 2022. So check back in and see if we have any newer videos in the future and how this all went, because this may not have worked. I told you when I started doing research, because there were a couple things we didn't want to do. We didn't have heavy machinery, so we did not want to have to buy heavy machinery or rent heavy machinery. We couldn't afford heavy machinery. So we couldn't level off this whole hillside, right? Because that wasn't available. And then secondly, one thing that we learned when we did the bathhouse was we really did not want to have to dig all of these footers, because it would have been 16 footers at 36 inches deep. That's just a lot of digging, which is supposed to hold a digger and two of us. So for whatever reason, we just really were against it personally. So I told you I just did some research, and it was just pretty much on YouTube, finding these people who were off grid in Alaska and Nova Scotia and all that, and they had talked about their soil type and how if they had really wet clay soil, that it had become common practice in these areas for doing concrete pillar foundations, right? Well, here in the hills of West Virginia, we personally have that type of subsoil, but everyone has been anti that we needed, or anti this type of foundation, and everyone we've talked to has told us that we needed to dig our footers, anchor them in so that we didn't slide off the mountain. And that very well may be true. We hope not, and we feel really stinking confident in it. But I wanted to talk to you about just some thoughts that we had as to why maybe there's normally an issue about doing it this way, and how we did it and why we think it's going to be okay. So the research that I did mentioned to use these patio pavers, right? I think they're an inch thick, and then to build your piers on top of it. And then we also, it's a common term to talk about dry stacking, which means the cinder blocks typically don't have any concrete or cement in them, but we filled them. Now, here's the thing. Our neighbors down the road just moved in, and they had theirs set up on block piers too. Hey, Poke. And they've noticed that they're already sinking. So that made us a little concerned. And then down the road, there's a new mobile home going in, and we noticed they had cinder block pillars way higher than ours. And it just got us to thinking, we knew that was a common practice, but why do people talk about those things shifting so much? And so far, for the months that these have been here, we've had lots of rain, and we haven't noticed any sinking or tilting yet. Doesn't mean that won't transpire. But here were our thoughts about it. When these people that I got this idea from, the Alaska, Nova Scotia build types and stuff, I didn't question him in this concrete paver at all. I was just kind of blindly okay, for whatever reason, this sounds good, trust these guys, let's give it a try. But we got to thinking as to what difference this would make. So typically when you see cinder block piers, you do not see the paver underneath. So you only, it's just concrete blocks stacked on each other. Well, think about this. Concrete blocks normally have really thin sides and then holes. So essentially they're like a cookie cutter. Well, you put a lot of weight on this stack of cookie cutters, that soft soil, or on top of soft soil, will eventually, the thin side of the wall is going to cut down into the earth. And then if the holes of the cinder block aren't filled, then that just allows like the earth to move up into the cinder blocks, right? Which essentially allows these pillars to just sink even more. So we're thinking it's highly possible that maybe this will work a little bit better because A, this paver acts as kind of like hard, solid ground. And it would take a lot of weight to push that entire paver into the earth because it's solid, there's no holes. 2, because that's there, or even if that wasn't there, we did fill the cinder block, which made it whole, which means if it were to sink, there's not really room for any earth to go up inside of it, which allows the pillar to squash. Does that make any sense? So another thing that we realized too is we really didn't disturb this land at all. Like, we didn't clear it out flat, we didn't clear the topsoil off of it or anything, except for leveling out the places right underneath the pier. And then we put crushed stone and sand. So when you disturb soil and things like that, you know, it tends to make it like a little bit more susceptible to being able to be malleable. So again, this is just the beginnings. I could come back here and make another video in 3 months and be like, do not do this because it shifted. But I just wanted to share that food for thought with you and see what you think. Like, have any of you all experienced this, built like this, thought about building like this, and what's been your experience with it? And, you know, is it possible that by creating like a little barrier, just such as adding this aggregate and then adding this paver, actually helps this type of foundation not sink down? Only time will tell, but I just wanted to chat about that. So crawling out of this hole here. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.